Well, welcome. Today we are going to cover converting flat files in Python. This is a fairly common exercise that I deal with pretty much on a daily basis. So for those of you trying to build kind of a workflow between multiple flat files and some kind of an output to go into a system, I think this video will be for you. So for starters, we are in the PyCharm IDE for this, and just a blank Python script file that we're working out of. So for starters, just to show you the files we're working with, two files. There's a employee table file, which is essentially a flat file. For those of you who don't know what that is just a file that the placements of particular data fields are a set limit. So like in this particular instance, this would be our employee ID. If you look down here in the bottom right, starts in position 1 or 0, and it goes for 5 fields, or to position 5. We have our naming information. I won't go through all of that just so we can get into the code, but that's one of the two flat files that we have. The other one is the sales for those employees. So the idea here is that we want to end up with a file that goes into another system that's delimited, that is the commission for those items. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, I'm going to make a variable to hold our employee file. And I'm actually going to go ahead and push the open command on it because we know we will be opening it here. And all that's going to do is actually open this particular item up, or this file up. And in this instance, it's actually going to be for reading, which is why we're going to pass the parameter R at the end of it as opposed to like a W. The other file we need to open up is our sales file. So once again, let's go ahead and bring this open. These are both on my desktop, so you're just seeing kind of my, my local drive where these things are at, and that one is called employee sales.txt. Let me just make sure. Yep. Okay. Once again, it's reading because we're really reading two files to compile them into one file to go into another system. The last file we need to make here is, we'll just call it the employee com file, or commission file for short. Same deal. This is actually going to be the file we're going to write to. Now, the thing to note here is, just for explanation purposes, we're going to be building an output file, but really the way we're going to build this, we should be able to kind of transplant, if you will, the output anywhere we would like to put it. In this instance, we're going to do it to a file. We're just assuming maybe another system is going to be importing this maybe. But you could do this to like a web service, you could do this to a database, what have you. We may cover those in another video at some other point. The next thing I put on here is just a variable to hold the delimiter that we're going to use for our output. Instead of just writing it in code, we'll put it up top. That way, if you ever had to change it later, a little bit easier to change there as opposed to having to change it several times in the script. So the first thing I want to do, now that we got a little bit of this boilerplate down, is build a dictionary to hold our employee information. And I'm going to give you a little reasoning why I believe you should do it this way as opposed to the other. So there's two ways to do things. You could, if you wanted to combine two files, you could technically do something like, for each employee in our employee file, and then in here say, for sales in sales file, do this, and then do some kind of a join. Now, these are very small files, so it's not really going to matter. But if you think about this, let's say these were millions of records. If we had these inside, or we had two loops inside here, there's a lot of iteration involved for something that's probably a pretty static file, which is this employee, and something that's a little bit more dynamic, which is your sales. So in essence, you could have a maximum of whatever your sales file size is times whatever your employee file size is. So instead of doing kind of an embedded iteration there, I would suggest we do something like a dictionary, because we know that our employee table or employee file, in fact, I actually need to put that down correctly. In this instance, we're just assuming that, let's say this client, this is a dump of their employee information, right? So we're going to assume in this instance that that employee ID that's right here is going to be unique. So we can get away with making a dictionary here. And so we're going to end up doing the dictionary and just reading this thing really once. So going back to what we kind of started there, I am going to iterate through the employee file, but I'm just going to do it once here to grab all the information and put it into a dictionary in our Python script. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the employee number. So I'm just going to say number equals. So at this point, this employee variable that we have here is actually in this for loop is going to be the iterable. So it is the item that is actually, as we go through the list one by one, it'll hold the value of whatever the string is, or this particular line. So that would be line 1, line 2, etc., etc. So in every iteration, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the data out of it, and we're just going to make it really simple to read. So we're going to grab employee, which is this point, just like I said, it's just the string, the first string in this instance. And the reason why I like doing Python for these scripts is for what I'm about to show you, is just how easy it is to grab like substrings out of it. So in Python, you can call a string, and then in square brackets you can pass it your starting and your ending position. And in fact, there's a whole bunch of other things. This is the very basic explanation of it. If you don't understand it that well or have a background of doing this, I'd encourage you to look this up. But there is a ton that you can do with strings in Python and splitting things out. But in this instance, all we're essentially saying is start from position 0 and go to position, it's actually 4 here, even though it says 5, it will stop at 4, and grab me that text, because that's the length of our field. The next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to put a strip on here, which is going to take out any of the characters that are blank at the end here, which is important to note if you're trying to match these things up later, kind of like a database, more or less. So we want to get those to the actual value. So that gives us our employee number. Our next thing is we're just going to go down the line here. You'll have to trust me that these are the correct positions. But the last name is position 5 to 15 for 10 characters total. Once again, we'll strip. We'll do first name, employee. We're going to start that at 15 and go to 25. And address equals, employee 25. It goes for 20 characters. Very good. I mean, this is kind of the mundane repetitiveness. If we had more fields, I'd pause it at this point, but we're pretty close here, so we'll just bear with me for 1 second. There goes our city, which is going to be in that position 45 to 65. And our state, once again, 65 to 67. And our zip equals employee 67 to 72. We're going to strip that as well. If I can type it here. Perfect. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to inject this into that, or add this into that employee dictionary that we made up here. And it's going to be really easy. We're going to call the employee dictionary, and since a dictionary works off of a unique key, which is what we're going to pass in here, we can really just pass it the number. And you could do this one of two ways. You could either string these together maybe with a delimiter if you'd like, or you can pass it in just like this, so that each of these would actually be a like an array, if you will, within the dictionary itself. All right, zip. Now, at this point, if this isn't making a lot of sense to you for what we did, really all we did is we went through, we stripped out all the data from the employee file one by one. We then made or inserted into our dictionary the unique key, which should be that employee number, and then we put those attributes after it. If you really want to just quickly test this too, just to see what's in there, you can do you can just iterate through this dictionary. You can do something like print employee dictionary. You can give it L value there. Oops, sorry, it's actually square brackets. Perfect. And when you run that, you'll actually see those data elements. So if I was to bring up this again It's just in a little bit more of a cleaner form. It almost looks like a JSON type object to some degree. But we just split it out. And if I was to just print the iterable that we made here, so just the L, you'd actually just see the key. So I mean, if we wanted it together, we'd want to do something like, you know, employee dictionary L. And you could do something like this, where you'd have, let's see here. Employee dictionary. Probably didn't type that in right. Must be string not too long. Okay. Yeah, I'd have to look at that for a second. But instead of troubleshooting, you could print it out there, I guess is what I'm getting at, if you wanted to see what was in there. And I just showed you the keys, and then I just showed you the values as well. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to iterate over our sales file now that we have our dictionary made up here, and we want to make our output file. So in this particular fictitious client request, let's just say, we have a, let's see, employee com file. We have a request to make an output that gives by their sales what that commission number is. So we need to get their address. Presumably, we'll just say we're cutting them a check. And this other system needs it in a format that has a delimiter, a pipe delimiter in this particular use case. So it's really going to be a mix of things from both files is what we're going to end up producing. So for starters, we're going to go ahead and open up, or we're going to go ahead and start our writing of our employee com file that we've already got open up here in a write status, and we're going to give it an alias of OF so that we can just shorthand whenever we're writing here. So now that we have that on the outside, we can go ahead and start iterating on the inside in the sales file. So once again, just like above, sales here is going to hold the lines of the sales, just like the employee held the lines in the employee file. And that's going to give us the ability to do what we want to do as far as our output here goes. So for starters, since we need to combine based upon that employee number, we need to grab the employee number from this sales file as well, this sales flat file. So once again, that's in position 1 for 5 characters, or position 0 here. The next thing we want to do is we actually want to call our employee dictionary, and what we want to do is we want to actually get that number. And actually, we'll go ahead and put this into a variable itself. What we'll end up getting back here, if the number exists with items, is we'll end up getting back that particular dictionary item with all the attributes that we had above. Now, one thing to note is if that does not exist, so if, let's just say, the dictionary does not have that employee number, we need to be able to do something with it, because the things we're going to do later on, if those attributes don't exist, it's going to bomb out on us. So what we want to say is if that employee info equals none, then we're just going to continue. Now in the real world, we'd probably want some kind of file made or error file that would go back to the client to say, hey, this employee, you have sales for it, but it's not in its export. Please let us know what it is. For the sake of time here, all I'm saying, this none attribute is what you'll actually get back if you try to call a dictionary key that doesn't exist. So we're saying essentially, hey, if this thing doesn't exist, just continue, get out of the loop here. So we're actually going to go to the next line in our sales file, and we're not going to continue on to the things we're about to do here below. So the next thing we want to do is start grabbing those elements from our employee info that we pulled above. So first we're going to grab our last name, and I can stop on this just for 1 second. Our employee info up here gave us back all of these elements. So think of it just like an array where this would be position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. So since we know our last name was in the first position, or 0, all we need to do at this point is say, okay, we know we have data elements because it's not equal to none, so our last name should technically be at this point in that first position of 0. So we get our last name We're going to go ahead and make first name, same kind of deal. We'll do 1, and actually let me just copy this so that we can go through this a little quicker. Our address, oops, to equals our city, which is going to be in 3, our state, which is going to be in 4, and our zip, which is going to be in 5. So those are all files from the employee dictionary that we made above. The thing we need to get out of our sales file is actually the commission amount. And so we're going to first start by doing just a sales string or a substring, just like we did above. So from position 23 to 28 in that file is actually that the dollar amounts here. And we're going to grab it and we're going to strip it just like we did before. We're going to go ahead though and add a little bit additional here. We're just going to put a $sign in front of it. So $sign plus, we're essentially doing a concatenation. Now that we have that, we're going to build our output format for our file here. And so in this particular thing, they just want it in a certain format. So first they want the employee number. They want this delimited, so in every, you think of it like in a database, like a column, more or less. We're just separating it with a delimiter, which is the delimiter here is what we called up top. So if I change that to a comma, the exclamation point, whatever, that's going to change there. The next thing is they want the first name plus the last name, so kind of written in a little bit more of a traditional sense for whatever system they're in. We're going to do the delimiter next, and now they want the whole address written into one field, so we're going to do the address plus the city. We're going to do a comma in between it and the state, and then plus another space plus our zip. And then we're going to have our delimiter one more time. The last element is actually going to be that commission amount. So that will write out our text file lines here for our output. So if we run this, what we're going to see here is, come up on the screen, is this commission file. So what you'll notice quickly out of the gate is we do have text, but it's all kind of put together, all jammed together. So one thing we'll actually need to add on here as well, several ways to do it. Here's just a quick and easy, is we'll put a new line in here, a new line character. So now you can see here, we'll actually bring up our sales side by side. So in this particular case, the input, flat file, the output delimited. We needed information from both our employee table and our employee sales that were in flat files. And this is our end product. So once again, if you are working, I just want to give you a good working example. If you're in the field of kind of converting a lot of text files that are flat, Excel, CSV, whatever it might be, Python works really well. I hope to have more videos on this, but for now, I hope that this was helpful for you. Have a good day.